silver stars wrought in needlework, and under the robe he wore a blue silk tunic. This was open at the breast, where was seen the front part of a sash with the emblem of his society. There was an eagle sitting on her young at the top of a tree, and was made of shining gold encircled with diamonds. The familiar chancellors were similarly dressed, but without the emblem, instead of which they wore carved sapphires hanging from a golden necklace. The courtiers wore brown cloaks, on which were embroidered flowers encircling young eagles. Beneath these, their silken tunics were of an opaline color, and so also were the garments covering their thighs and legs. Such was their dress. Amen. Why would we have a whole paragraph dedicated to telling us what the outfits of people in heaven are? Obviously, it's important. It's part of the Word. The Lord instructed Swedenborg to write only that which came from him. So here we are with a whole paragraph of only that which comes from the Lord. Something to do with the way people are dressed in heaven. I mean, that's what it appears to be. I mean, it's obvious that's exactly what it is. For what reasons interiorly this is of such significance, we can discuss that. I have a couple books up here. I'm going to refer to them later on in the class, but I wanted to show you a couple of things in this work called the Tabernacle of Israel. Perhaps you studied it when you were younger in any new church school. So it was based upon the work that Bishop George DeCharms did very early on in his work as a new church educator. But I'm going to show you a couple pictures of some of the things that were in the tabernacle. That is a picture of the showbread, the table for the showbread in the tabernacle. And there's individual pictures throughout the book that just go into the various details of the tabernacle and the different elements that were used. I'm looking for quickly for the one that has to do with the garments of Aaron. I thought I had it marked. We'll show you again. These were made out of gold, and those that were said to be made out of gold were made out of gold. In other words, the things that the Lord commanded Moses to make out of gold. And of course, they're smaller. They're not life-size, but they're a model of the tabernacle that the bishop made. So I'm going to get this one other picture. It's not as good a picture in terms of, it just shows the priests and that they were all instructed, the Levites were instructed on exactly what they should wear. And I know the picture is really tiny, and I don't have it to show you up on the slideshow, the screen. According to a very ancient law, every firstborn male was to be sanctified to the Lord. This was to be done in recognition of the truth that all life is a divine gift, and every blessing must be ascribed to God. However, the rite of sanctification among idolatrous nations degenerated into rites of sacrifice. Human sacrifice became well nigh universal, and a strong tendency to adapt it was inherited by the Jewish or Hebrew people. Practice was, of course, abominable. However, in the sight of heaven, it could not be, and therefore in the sight of heaven, it could not be permitted. In place of it, two less objectionable rites were instituted, namely the sacrifice of animals and the sanctification of the firstborn. With the sons of Israel, however, it was commanded that the entire tribe of Levi should be set apart for the use of the priesthood, and by this act all the firstborn of Israel would be redeemed. Amen. Let us bow our heads for the prayer and benediction. Lord, we ask you to sanctify our lives, and that the faith that we receive from you, that which is firstborn within us, the truth that we receive in our understandings, that this may be your truth, and that it may lead to the birth of further things of your church, that all these things may be representative by the things of the priesthood, and by the things of the magistrate, or of the royalty in the kingdoms that you create in us. Lord, help us to serve you and you alone in all things of our life. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Amen. When I was going through theological school, we were told it's always good to start off the year of your doctrinal instruction with your society talking about things having to do with ritual or things having to do with the rites of the church, the way the church operates. I don't know if we should always stick to that, but I kind of like getting out some of the books that I have. One of my favorite books, one of my doctrinal heroes is W.F. Pendleton, and he gave me these materials to look at. The Tabernacle of Israel. How many of you read this? Can you share if you really? Yeah, you might not have. It's a book that you may have seen. Maybe you studied it. Maybe it was done in a society. I don't know. But it's a fascinating study of Bishop DeCharnes basically getting all of the Bernathen kids to. I'm not sure. I think they collected the gold from their parents, right? Yeah, so they all did a contribution like the children of Israel did at the time when the contributions were made to build the tabernacle, and created this miniature version. And then he wrote a book basically covering the doctrinal material connected with it. Yes, it's a fantastic thing to look at.
Michael, when Eric was in grade 3, he'd seen his pictures, and we took him to the Grand Canyon, I guess it was.
Yes.
Walked in and he went in there and he went in there and he said, that's exactly how it should be. It was really fascinating.
Oh.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
So I went to do a wedding this weekend, and talking with the couple about it, and I talked about my priestly garments and whether they wanted me to wear my robe or not, and they said yeah. And so I took my travel robe up there, and when we go to do the services, of course, in our church here, we wear a robe. Now that robe, as you know, the design was sent down from heaven, and all the colors and all the things that are designed from that, like the tabernacle itself, come directly from heaven. How many of you knew that? This is a test. I shouldn't even put it that way, because in fact, it's not sent down from heaven. I set you up. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't do that to innocent students of the church.
We wondered where you were going with it.
I know. How important is it to wear robes when you perform your priestly functions? It kind of depends who you are, where you grew up, how you grew up, and what the people that were really important to you told you. And then the doctrine is developed in your mind. And then when you go to the Word, you'd think, be able to get a very clean version directly from the Word that instructs you. But we all go to the Word and read the Word according to the instruction we have received prior. We're all instructed to actually go to the Word, leave behind everything that has been told us by authority figures when we're grown up, spiritually speaking, and approach the Lord one-on-one in a sort of unbiased or objective way. And that's the only way, in one sense, perhaps the only way the church could ever be built in anybody's mind. Our ancestors, you go back far enough, none of them were new church, right? They came to the church because something of the Word that was presented to them by other people in the church appealed to them, and they said, I'd like to become a member of this church. And then through generations, we build up a body of tradition and a body of culture related to everything. So my first, I hope I have this, I can bring it up here. I have a lovely picture of Reverend Joseph Proud. Have any of you ever heard of him? Ministers, you're allowed to raise your hand if you ever heard of Reverend Joseph Proud. There's a picture of him, and I'm hoping I can get him to come up here. That's not him. No. That's somebody else. That's Fred Gyllenhaal. You might have recognized him from a view because he was he was a pastor here. The pictures I'm going to show, many of them are very poor quality. It's based on a study done by some relative of Jim's, probably. Constance Pendleton. Can you tell me anything about Constance Pendleton? Okay. So she wrote this 180-some page document related to priestly garments, which Chris Barber down at the Academy sent a copy to Gwenda, and she sent it to me. And in it, among the things that are able to be viewed is, here we go, there's a problem. See if I can get this picture to come up and expand on it. Not expanding. That's Benaid. And there's probably some trick to make this work, but I can't find it because I'm not that smart. If anybody else down there would like to give me some... Down here? Oh, yeah. So there is a very stately picture of our first bishop of the General Church, right? First bishop of the Academy, yes.
The General Church of the Lord's Advent, I believe?
I forgot the name now. It was something like that. The General Church of the Advent of the Lord in Pennsylvania and related. I forget what. He was the bishop of the Church of the Academy, which was the internal church compared to the convention church, whatever it was called at that time. And then Benaid, suffered some mental illness. Don't know how else to describe it. And 5 or 6 of the leading pastors, or all the pastors that were then associated with the Academy, separated from him. And they started the General Church of the New Jerusalem as we know it, or as it is now called. And W.F. Pendleton was the first bishop, although he had already been ordained as a bishop of the Academy by Benaid. And it's that ordination upon which all of our ordinations are based. Kind of an interesting line of descent, if you think about it. Are any of the General Church ordinations, quote unquote, legitimate if they're based on the ordination of a man who was ordained illegitimately under his own enlightenment? Because he didn't do it as an ordaining bishop, or they didn't have bishops, but an ordaining pastor of convention, because he didn't ordain him into the 3rd degree of convention, because there weren't 3rd degrees of convention. Bishop Benaid decided that, among with others, not complete in isolation, and correct me if I'm wrong about some of this stuff, because there are different views of the history here. Bishop Benaid was an ordaining bishop. I don't believe they were bishops. They were ordaining, but he made himself bishop, or he called himself bishop, or others called him bishop, and then he made W.F. Pendleton a bishop who had ordaining power only from the power vested in Benaid, who was not doing it according to the power vested in Benaid. He was doing it in the power vested in by himself, in himself. Does that make sense? Right. Yeah, the Academy Church definitely started that way. And so Bishop W.F. Pendleton became a bishop not according to the order of the church that existed at that time. Maybe the church that existed at that time wasn't in order anyway. Or maybe Benaid wasn't. Just one opinion. I like to be controversial, don't I? So look at what Benaid's wearing. He's wearing a red outer... I don't know all the names for these things. Some other people probably do better than me. It's not a chasuble. An outer robe and a tunic. There's a name for these supplices. Yeah. Thank you. For having a master's in a couple different things, I just can't read very well. I think it talks about it as being a very woolen blood red. And that was his bishop look. And I don't think he came up with it all by himself, but it was a lot of his own culture and influence of what the writings say about the colors, and then different stoles and vestments. There's a lot, 181 pages, just starting to touch on it. This was written in 1954. I can't tell you that I'm an expert on this doctrine or this study itself, so I'm not sure what great other studies have been done since 1954. We had the liturgics notes that were done by Martin Pryke. Help me out here. I don't know what you had Jared. And some earlier historical stuff that was pretty much put together by, I think, Hugo Oedner and Carl Theophilus Oedner, some of the other scholars of that time. It's not that important, but here's a good picture showing what Benaid really wanted to be seen wearing. And let's see if I can get to one. Oh, here he is. This is the Reverend Joseph. Come on. Now this looks very Methodist to me. I don't know why. Ah, just having a Joseph Proud. Is it Proud? Purple. And talks a lot in this document about how much purple was being used. The last important discussion I had about the use of purple in the church was Miss Iris or Miss Irene saying that the sign out front should be purple because it is such a royal color. And I listened to her, and of course, just the way she talked made me want to giggle, because I forget if it was Iris or Irene, but one or the other back in '88 or whatever, when we were, it's a very, very royal color. I can't imitate her. I shouldn't try anyway. It's a beautiful color. And we don't do that. So through the years, the ministry has gone through a lot of different kinds of styles of dress. And there's not one place in the Word that says a minister should look like this. What we do is we base it on especially the book of Revelation, where I, John, was in on the Lord's day, turned and saw the one like unto the Son of Man, dressed in a garment white as wool, his head white and hair white, down to his feet as if burned in brass, girt about the paps with a golden girdle. In his hand were the 7 stars, in his hand were the 7 spirits, surrounded by 7 golden lampstands. And so we set up the altar with the 7 lampstands. And through the years, it's changed from candlesticks to lampstands. At the academy or in the cathedral, they have lamps, oil lamps that are now burning compared to just candles back in the day. And the minister is wearing a garment closely related to what was seen by John. But it doesn't say to be a minister you need to wear a robe. That I know of. Does anybody know of a place where it does say that we're supposed to wear a robe if we're going to be performing priestly duties? It seems to go with the things that are spoken of in the writings, like the passage I mentioned, that people who are the prince or are the priest are seen a certain way, and obviously the tabernacle, the book about the tabernacle, obviously the source where the book about the tabernacle is written is the 5 books of Moses, the Lord giving Moses the instruction, and all the vestments and garments that the priesthood, the sons of Aaron, were to wear. And how at the bottom of their garments they were to have little pomegranates, and they were to have all these little things embroidered, and it was made out of a certain material, etc., with certain colors. The same as the curtains, the same as the walls, the same as the showbread, as everything. Because it was a representative of a church. I remember the first time I heard somebody talking about not that the Israelites were a representative church, but a representative of a church. Anybody here wonder who it was that talked to me about that? Jim Cooper. Yeah, poor Jim. I point out various things he's done for me over the years. As a sideline, Jim, I'm going to embarrass you one more time. Gwen and I were watching John Michael Talbot perform a song. And he's a wonderful, you've heard of John Michael Talbot. We have a couple of his songs in our liturgy. Gwen and I went down to Arkansas to see if we could visit him at his hermitage, but he was leaving to celebrate a birthday party. How unspiritual. No, he was on his way out of town. We met him on the road, and we said, hello, we're looking for John Michael Talbot. He said, I'm John Michael Talbot. Oh, well, I'm going into town to celebrate with my friends. So we didn't want to crash his birthday party with somebody in his hermitage, but we did meet him. And now he looks very different because his beard was probably this long then, and now it's like really long. It was amazingly long. But Gwen and I turned to each other. He said, you know, the first place we heard John Michael Talbot was an album that was given to us for our wedding. Right, Glenda? Yeah. By Jim Cooper.
I think it was actually for your graduation.
Oh, could have been.
Theological school graduation.
Yeah. All right. I'll stop embarrassing.
Two of those events were very close together.
But it was given.
Yes. Yes. So I'm going to skip, if I can do this in any kind of decent manner. I will try my best to go into this this document. I'm gonna flip down through a lot of things, so I don't want you to get seasick looking at me coming to various pictures that are in here. And the pictures, as I said, they're not perfectly done. And the numbering in the document in front of me is not the same as the numbering on the document that I got off of whatever this thing is called here. Google Documents. So I'm trying my best to find the first selection of those, and it's on page 30 here. And that happens to be Martin Pryke wearing garments. And it explains that this is wearing a white wool traveling robe designed by himself and made in England in 1945 or 46 when he was a visiting pastor. Now, I wear a traveling robe, and I kind of thought when I went up to this wedding I did in Wolf, like I'm going to take my traveling robe. Well, am I allowed to do that? If Martin could do it, I can do it. And the next one I think is somebody you might recognize, Ursa. There's the Reverend Carol Alden. Is it showing up? Yeah. Again, these are photographs. I'm not sure if the person, Constance, who was writing this, had these people modeling these. And I'm not sure if there's a much, much better set of pictures that I could have gotten. But this is the one Chris Barber sent. And so it just says K.R. Alden wearing his one-piece traveling robe, front and rear views, designed and made by Miss Margaret Bostock, first used in 1945. Again, if K.R. Alden can wear a traveling robe, I guess we're all allowed to. I didn't know till I got this where some of this history from. I don't know if we ever studied this in theological school. I did. I don't think I've ever seen this document. Do you remember seeing it before, Jim? No? Okay.
Last time in one of my studies.
Oh, okay. Again, I'm sorry. I think these pictures are great, and I hope that I'm not wasting your time doing this. I have to... 16. I need to get 17, 18, 19. Okay. So I'm just going to... Okay. So here again is beloved Benaid in one of his... Oh, this is the same outfit that Benaid wearing red silk robe over white linen tunic with Academy seal on the red ribbon. So that's the picture that got sent around, I do believe. Is that the exact same picture, Karen? Can you tell? No? Is it the Academy seal?
This is a painting. That's a
Okay.
And
So,
obviously, it's set up as, formal portraitures.
okay. So this is the Academy seal that's on here. But that is basically the same outfit, right? Okay, so it's a red silk. I thought maybe it was wool. They had some discussion about the two different things. What should they wear? This is, again, an older Benaid. Now here I'm not sure exactly what the difference is, but it's wearing a red silk robe over a white linen tunic with gold-colored crocheted silk girdle, taken by William Gill in Colchester during the period that Bishop Benet was in England. I already told you when I visited in Colchester how very, okay, I'll just use the word, how very cool it was to go in there and go into the closet and pull out the hanger that said W.H. Benaid. Probably was hanging that garment or other garments up when I visited there. I mean, that was the hanger. It was a pretty special thing. Yes? Yes?
And his
Reverend Gill, yes.
sister was our teacher in school, or his
Muriel?
Muriel, or would that be his daughter? I think it'd be his daughter, Muriel.
Just say, I wish the pictures were better.
Granny's.
I wish I could control this better. Same as 170 at 19. That's the same as the other one. Benaid wrote concerning the installation of Mr. Bostock as pastor, "It was to me a matter of great pleasure and great promise for the future that the Council in Chicago so readily agreed to the introduction of the official garment of the priest. The use of this will be perceived and felt more and more. It is an ultimate so orderly and so plainly presented in the heavens that no one can but marvel at the backwardness of the new church in not adopting it. Mr. Toffel will be sent an extra robe from Philadelphia, together with mine, as a pattern for the making of a new one. Mr. Pendleton likes this pattern very much." On Sunday morning, Bishop Pendleton, assisted by Pastors Toffel and Pendleton, conducted divine worship. In the afternoon, the ordination of the ministers Scherzerny and Schreck. Now, they were great starting off, but I think he had little problems with them later on. Came into the second degree, or they had a problem with him. It was a most solemn act, the solemnity being enhanced by the robes of office with which the officiating clergymen and their candidates were clothed. Bishop Benaid, in his robe of purple red silk, the one I think that's been passed around, Pastors Toffel and Pendleton in their robes of hyacinth blue, with the stole of that color, and candidates in their simple linen tunics girded with silken girdles of a golden color. They went all out in these garments, for these garments. And it's something that, in one sense, I really, really love and could see a lot more of. And yet, as the trends in society have gone, it's something that more or less people aren't really that taken with overall in our society. And later on, I'm going to read you the change that that was made in the Chicago Society, 1870. The congregation stopped liking the use of these robes, and so the pastor said it's not a matter of deep interior doctrine that we have to wear these things. It's the way we think that things look good or things can go in an external, but we don't need to be firm in these externals. We need to be firm in the internals. So changes were made. Yes?
I know our friends in the north, they like the minister to put a robe on. It brings them in the spirit of their own church. That he's not just a casual friend. He's in position of being the pastor, giving the service.
Right?
And I think it sets their mind that they are in a church.
Yes.
They're not in their living room. So I know they like the robe.
Well, and I feel the same way. When I put on my robes, it changes my state, or I pray that it can, and I think about it's my original robe, and I think about when I first put it on. I never step into it. I always put it in over my head, which is just sort of almost superstitious, because there's nothing wrong with anybody stepping in, but I've always thought I need to have this come down over me from above. So there's a great power to that ultimate for me. You can see I get emotional talking about it. Because I was asked, I think by the Lord, I mean that's how I feel, to do this job. And this is a statement that people that love the fact that I'm a pastor, love the use of pastoring, sewed this material together so I could wear it. It was individually made for me. I forget who exactly made it. Glenda probably remembers. Sonia Deering. She probably made all of our garments at that point. So to me, it's a very powerful way of expressing the change of state we bring to worship. It's the same, I hope, when people get ready to come to church and they don't just wear anything. They wear something that is befitting to come into the house of the Lord. I'm going to try to skip ahead. 23, okay, I need to...
In a row.
Right,
Many.
Oak Arbor
yep.
in
Australia,
Colorado.
Grandview.
Actually, Oak Arbor is occasional. When I preach there, I wear a robe. And
To go back
and they
to
do
pastor
they do
there,
for
is it?
special services. Oak Arbor is sort of sometimes and sometimes not.
Okay.
I haven't done a survey, and perhaps the other ministers know better than me. I know Alan Cowley in Florida wears not a full robe, but almost like a long shirt. That's a special long white shirt.
It has a collar, more like a Nehru collar.
Okay. And through the years,
And a very small little sword.
right. And through the years, what we have been handed down to us has come out a lot from the church culture of the Church of England or Methodist Church, Anglican Church, Catholic Church. When the cathedral was being built and they were talking about what ritual they would use, there was a great pushback against it being too Catholic and great concern. And a lot of the material that was being presented at that point by W.F. Pendleton and N.D. Pendleton were to say, we're going to make this new church. This will be a new church place of worship. And there will be a lot of ritual, but there'll be a lot of old ritual, but there'll be a lot of new ritual. Old ritual isn't evil or wrong. A lot of the best ritual is something that's been around since forever. Worshipping in groves, worshipping towards the sun. We're only not supposed to do that if we make it idolatrous, but to worship facing the east. So we have all of our temples face the east. That's based on most ancient church. Although the most ancient church, it said, didn't have externals of worship. Of course they did. They used correspondences, and so they worshipped on top of mountains. They worshipped, and they had stones set up as boundaries, such things like that. Anybody recognize this gentleman? Willard Pendleton. And the Willard Pendleton showing red silk robe, used by Bishop W.F. Pendleton in the early 1890s for academy ceremonies and services. He also wore this with an academy seal, which is what we have in the Benaid picture, worn by Bishop Benaid, but smaller, and the insignia of the office of Vice Chancellor. So,
That's what he still wears for graduation.
the Chancellor.
Yeah, so.
So this is obviously outside the walls of the cathedral. Picture taken by Cooper. Anybody related to you, Jim? Oh, those Coopers. You never know who they're related to. And the next picture is Reverend William Acton. Would that be Bishop Alfred Acton I's father or brother? I don't know. It's dated between 1897 and 1901. So, but it's a photo by William Gill of Colchester, who took this photo. It's a bow tie. It's a bow tie. He's holding, looks like a liturgy or a bound book, and it's a very, very wide stole. It doesn't go into the description in this picture of all the details. I think it's mentioned in the text later on. Reverend Andrew Zerny. Now, we just read the description of what he was wearing. Again, the same picture by photographer Gill of Colchester. This is between 1902 and 1919.
Michael, go
Yeah.
back to that picture of, I think it's W.H. Acton.
William
Is it
W.M. says W.M. Acton.
W.M. Huh. He
Could be
might
William,
have been, he might have been the brother of old Alfred.
Of old Alfred, Alfred
Yeah.
the First.
And they didn't go, he didn't go general church.
Well, that could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. The stoles of the second and third degree were made of velvet, very long, reaching to the hem of the robe, somewhat wider than present, and finished at the bottom with knotted or twisted fringe. The bishop's stole was a darker red than is used at present. The pastor's very pale sky blue, both lined with white. The best illustration of this type is the Crunlin, which is on page 300 of this book. There are so many permutations? Yeah, that's the right word. Of the garments. I was very surprised when I got this and started reading through it that so many people did basically what they wanted to do, and because convention was a congregational institution, if the congregation approved or really liked it or had no objections and the pastor really liked it from his last pastorate, he would just wear what he wore before. So the first general church liturgy, so some things are talked about in there, subject of ritual, certain forms, and that liturgy, of course, was written before the cathedral was brought into existence. Anybody recognize who that is? Emil Crunland, wearing a full white linen robe, but I want to get down to the bottom of it. Check that out, right? It reads, a full white linen robe with long velvet sky blue stole, a gold-colored silk girdle, and this was taken in Toronto in 1905, this photograph. Was he a pastor here in Toronto? Oh. Right up on the wall there, I'm sure. Okay. There's the explanation there. This is Enoch S. Price. Says it's taken about 1940. Look how wide the stoles are, right? Very full. And I can't really tell from this picture or that one what he's wearing as a collar or as a tie. It doesn't explain it. Enoch Price, taken about 1914. I'm reading the text from the bottom of the page. When he was on sabbatical leave, the robe of white linen with the blue velvet stole. Notice the width of the stole. Yeah, we did. Which was probably the one with which he was ordained into the second degree of the priesthood in 1891. Different colors generally, and it did talk about the width of W.F. Pendleton's something or other being not as wide as that of Benade's when he was ordained into the bishop position as the academy bishop. Anybody recognize this face? And that's okay if you don't. I don't know if it's related to Sarah Hedston, but it's the Reverend John Hedston. Headsten. Is that the same spelling as Sarah? Okay. So I just know the name because I'm reading it to you. John Hedston, pastor of the Swedish language group in Chicago in 1914 to 1923. Pardon? It's hard to tell with the sheen whether that is black or not, but what do you think of the bow tie, right? And finally, in this little section out of the book. That is Robert Tilson, in the second degree of the priesthood, wearing a robe of very heavy white linen with blue velvet stole embroidered in gold. So again, it's not a really great picture, but you can see when I wear my celebratory stole that I wear and think, oh, you know, I'm really breaking new ground here, or people should be upset with me because I'm so untraditional. Tilson, Bishop of England. Have I got the right guy? Michael Church. But he was made a bishop, was he not? His stole was used for festival services, such as Christmas, Easter, June 19th, and for Holy Supper. This was taken prior to 1914, before he joined the General Church. Now, did they make him stop wearing those robes because they're now General Church? I don't actually know. I need to do a little more study on all of this. So that's just what I just read to you.
So Michael, there was never any standard. You're never told what you should wear?
You know, when I was going through theological school, I kind of thought, well, this is your uniform. And yeah, there's some studies about it. I remember I couldn't get my hands on my old theological school books if I ever had any that specifically talked about it. We were taught liturgics by Martin Pryke, and I have volume 2, but I don't have volume 1. It might be in the volume 1 notes of that. And again, if either of you two have more to chime in. And I knew there was long discussion of it way back from early 1800s in convention. And certain people, especially people that ended up being sort of the precursors of the General Church, were very much 3 degrees of the ministry, and the priesthood separate organization, etc. So Richard DeCharms, Toffles, some of the Toffles that ended up being General Churchish or Academy. So we just wore what we were, you know. And I always thought that's just what you're supposed to do. I didn't really think about it much. Yes, Jim?
It was what we were given.
It was what we were given.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're very valuable, they're handmade, and said, here's the robe you wear.
Right.
There wasn't like we got a chance to discuss what we
Right.
wanted.
Yeah. We didn't ask the tailor to make up a certain robe a certain way. Were you going to say something, Jared? Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead to I think a picture probably most people have seen before, if I can find it. Oh, it's going to be hard to get much out of this picture. It's just a bunch of ministers walking at the June 19th celebration, I think, or maybe it's the dedication of the cathedral. I don't know. But, it's too bad. Anybody know a quick way to flip that? Pretty sure this is N.D. Pendleton, and this is W.F. Pendleton. And I think behind them is a guy that's going to be the bishop after N.D. I think that is George DeCharms. And the other people, it's just showing, wow, they're heavy-looking garments, not light like we have. They just look really heavy. And then way down here you do see, oh, sorry. I don't think it was wool, linen. Again, you can see the tassels on this one. Whoever this gentleman is, I don't know. So it doesn't have a good explanation of this picture right off the top. Oh, here, in the picture of the procession at the dedication. So it's the dedication of the cathedral, 1919. Various links are noticeable, and the newer ones were made without a fringe. Bishop N.D. Pendleton in this picture is wearing a shorter stole without the fringe, and that would be him, N.D. His stole was lighter, brighter red, but when it was made was uncertain. It may possibly be the one with which he was consecrated into the 3rd degree in 1912, or it may have been the new one made after he moved to Bernathen in 1914, but before 1919, because 1919 was the dedication of the cathedral took place. George Pendleton, excuse me, W.F. Pendleton has also adopted the brighter and red shortly after the dedication. So that's W.F. and that's N.D.
So it's pretty well up to the individual to choose.
That's, more and more of what I'm getting is,
They want
Yeah.
their own. When you were ordained, do you have to buy your own robes?
no,
That's what I was gonna,
what's the name? Deering, what's her name?
We were told that you were
Sony.
given your first robe. If you needed another one, then you had to pay
Oh,
for
I
it.
see, okay.
And they should be insured for, at that point, I was told $300, but it'd probably be more like $1,000 now, if not much more.
So you're
They were
given what you're
hand-
supposed
they
to
were
wear.
hand-downs.
I was given what we were, I didn't ask any questions. It's what everybody, we were given that robe. I thought it was from heaven. I mean, I didn't really, but I thought there'd been a lot of study done about it, and I just maybe didn't pay attention when they told me to read those books or something. I don't remember thinking a whole lot about it, just that it felt wonderful, and I'm going to wear this.
We adjusted it, extra tall guys, they alter the little bit of the design, and your initials are embroidered.
Jim?
I think the history of it is the older system, they were having these things made for themselves, custom by an individual.
Yeah.
By the time we came along, they had systemized it and had a committee led by Sonia Deering. And like a number of people actually worked on the robes, but by that time they'd established a standard pattern. A number of people worked on them, and so they were being given that way, rather than each guy being responsible for making his own.
Yeah, that's true.
So we were institutionalized.
But Michael, why would you question it? I mean, if you go to work for Starbucks, you wear the Starbucks uniform.
That's what
Well,
he-
because
part of your
we're
job.
told to question the things of our doctrine and why we believe certain things.
Theologue just
As a young theologue, yeah.
When you accept the fact that that was part of the deal, you got this robe and you said, thank you very much. And
I generally was pretty nice that way, but I could also be a real pain in the butt. Ask my professors, ask my classmates, ask my
You
wife.
didn't, see, you didn't question it.
I
That's-
didn't, in this particular
No.
case,
And
it
if you
didn't.
look at the girdles now, they're slightly different. They're hard to make. Ask Karen. She attempted making one. They're not easy. But the pattern
Anybody
has,
who can crochet can just get those things done
but
in
the
a day,
pattern
right?
has changed still. The pattern of how they make them has changed still. And the velvet they use.
Yeah, but they represent things, different
Yeah,
things,
I
that's
mean-
why you,
And they're polyester robes now. They're
Yes.
they're
Right.
not linens. They realize this is much more practical. It makes much more sense, and they're washable, and so.
That was
Anyways,
an innovation from the weekend.
What was?
The going to a wash and wear polyester.
A wash and wear polyester.
Moving
Yeah.
away from linen.
but they're awfully.
Poly cotton, because linen is a mess. You put that in
Oh.
you just look at it cross-eyed and it starts wrinkling.
Right.
Not a mess, it's beautiful, but it just wrinkles.
Nice.
that looks
Willard
like-
Pendleton with a red velvet chasuble used by Bishop W.F. Pendleton. And I showed another picture of Willard. I don't think it was exactly the same, but it looks like it was standing in the same spot. Again, it was W.R. Cooper that took the picture in '54. This was the first chasuble made about 1915. So I think he's just modeling it perhaps for Constance Pendleton. Yes,
My dad wore a trustable here in the picture we got.
and the one up on back there. Yeah.
It's an overcover,
Like a poncho. Yeah.
how do you spell it?
CHAUC
Here,
SABLE.
there it is, chasuble.
Chasuble.
C-H-A-S-U-B-L-E.
Never heard of the word.
Yeah,
Well, now you have.
Yeah, now I have. Use that word for the day.
Yeah,
the following page,
Yeah. I always,
It's
I
a funny
think,
sounding word.
I think somebody told me one time we stopped using the chasuble because it did seem like other
Yeah.
churches. It didn't seem new church enough or something.
that's W.F. Pendleton and N.D. Pendleton. It looks like the dedication of the cathedral. This is what it says. It is the dedication of the Bernathen Cathedral. Well, they'd been up all night trying to figure out what they were going to say. Right? I,
He actually retired and put it in
Oh, yeah, okay.
the.
As I say, he brought it here one time and
Yeah.
showed the school children.
Yeah, he was carrying it around for a while.
Bishop W.F. Pendleton is wearing the standard white linen robe with a red stole and the gold chain and medallion presented to him after his retirement in 1917. So that's what this is. His stole was of an older style, darker red with a fringe. There you go, see the fringe down there. His girdle is a gold silk. So in there, and of course that hangs down there. Again, I wish these were color pictures, but you know, wishes were bigger and all that stuff. Bishop N.D. Pendleton, here, is wearing a chasuble of gold metallic cloth and red velvet stole. It's taken outside of the church immediately after the service. So maybe they're just exhausted. They don't look happy, but this was the culmination of, you know, a lifetime dream. So yeah, you are. Yeah. So I'm going to get to, can anybody recognize that face from a distance? That's George. George de Charms. And it says he's wearing a standard white linen robe, still used, 1954. This is the pattern with raglan, R-A-G-L-A-N sleeves.
Didn't I just talk to you yesterday about
Was that what the...
It's
Yeah,
this way.
raglan sleeves, it's the way, the style.
I was wearing a shirt with raglan sleeves. It's for a team. So that's what it
Like
says.
raglan, I've never heard of that.
Raglan sleeves first introduced about 1912, and photo by Cooper. So there you go. That's, I guess, more of what we have now. Okay. You know what they say? You learn so much when you teach. Yeah. Anybody recognize that face? Again, one of your former pastors, I do believe. It's not a great picture. Sorry. It's Hugo. No, wait yeah, hold on a second. Yeah. It's Hugo Odner wearing a white linen robe with a blue stole of the second degree of the priesthood. Blue looks too dark in the photo. So I think these are basically now are just 1954. Whoopsie, sorry, wrong direction. And we're just looking at things that are pretty standard now. The next one's going to be W.F. or N.D. Pendleton or Willard Pendleton. Sorry, it's taking too long when it's too blown up like that. And there again is Bishop Pendleton, 1954, wearing a standard white robe with red velvet stole of the third degree of the priesthood. I think he's going, are you done taking pictures yet? I think he is. I think he is. So it looks like for this study, I think Constance Pendleton just got these ministers to come, put your robes on. I'm going to take a bunch of pictures, and she collected a bunch of other pictures. And Jim Cooper and I never knew about this study when we went through theological school. I'm not sure who discovered it. Did you discover it, Jared? No? But you said you saw it, though.
This book was mentioned to us.
Uh-huh.
I was in school with Chris Barber, so maybe he had something to do with it.
He just loves church history, so I had been talking to him and I said, hey, do you know anything about any study done about road
Yeah,
and stuff
so
like that?
blame this on Gwenda. She really got me on to
Well,
this.
and then I
She
went
got
to
this
read
one.
it, but it's 181 pages
Yeah,
online. That's too
so I've
much.
been,
I can't
so,
do that.
you know what they say, I just look at the pictures. This we already saw of K.R. Alden in his travel robe and Martin Pryke in his travel robe. And then a lot more discussion, and then sort of discussion about who's going to wear what, you know, committees making decisions, 1980, you know, a lot of Chicago, like that was on page. So I'm going to, Reverend Mr. Hibbard, the use of the supplice, is that how you pronounce that, do you think? Okay, I got 5 minutes, I want to finish up. After speaking, this is not what you're reading here. I'm sorry, I'm reading something else. After speaking of the state of the feeling of his own congregation, he mentioned that a majority are in favor of the supplice. He goes to say, the fact that its use is unpleasant to many members of the congregation demands a careful and charitable consideration. So at the end it basically says, yeah, most people seem to like it, but many don't. I'm going to stop wearing it. Yep. And whenever else I could do the courtesy and convenience, I've noticed the effect, and therefore it's pleasant and useful, but I'm satisfied on the whole with the general church's position on this, etc., etc. One of the things I found was ministers saying that in Brazil, that when he died, he was buried in his ministerial robes. That was kind of a nice, I don't know, a nice thing to find. That's how important they are. There's a bunch of pictures about designs of robes and different, way towards the end here. Let's see if I can get to it. So this is Bishop W.F. Pendleton wearing his black silk school robe, his red stole at a tree planting ceremony, and he's also wearing his red beret. Not a green beret like the old song and the army people, but the red beret. And that's discussed in this thing. Of course, don't all ministers wear berets? Now, he's doing this as part of academic regalia. So there's a whole different discussion in this book about what to wear if you're doing charter day activities and graduation activities. But here you go. Here's his beret. Somebody else, I think that's the charms in the beret. Yeah, yep. So the other one was Pendleton, but this is wearing his beretta. Yeah, but it's a beret, a beretta. I like this picture a lot. This is Gyllenhaal again. We went through that. Yeah. You want to go back up and see him?
It's interesting, that picture of
Wearing a
right,
school
there you
robe.
are,
Wearing a
right there.
school robe.
Okay, that's a school robe. He wore that when we had worship
Yeah.
every morning, and on some of those kind of occasions. But you notice it's just simply, maybe it was zippered on or whatever, but you notice he's got his white shirt and his tie on.
Yeah.
He didn't get into a full robing or anything, just put this outfit on.
It reads thus. He's wearing his school robe of dark blue wool. So that'll keep him warm in those cold days. Wool/serge, S-E-R-G-E. What is that? A kind of finish? Okay. With a blue stole. This robe was designed and made by Miss Edith Craigie. I bet some of you know of her, or later Mrs. J. Knight. So that. Oh, okay. So Mrs. Craig. Oh, Joe Knight. Miss Craigie. Miss.
Serge was a cloth used for uniforms. I think in World War I
Oh.
and II, it was a fairly substantial.
Yeah, it's
Hard wearing
finished
fabric.
fabric.
So
Yeah.
this is the church militant here. These are guys wearing a wool. Yeah, and it probably lasts forever. In Toronto, about 1935, it has raglan sleeves, as we've been discussing, and concealed front opening, and was used for doctrinal classes and school opening from that time until Mr. Gyllenhaal left Toronto in 1946, so 11 years. Since then, for academic processions.
But all the time our kids were in school, they had a blue robe. It wasn't that one, but they all had a blue robe for
Morning worship.
every time, yeah.
There's K.R. Alden again, wearing his black school robe with a blue stole, used for daily school openings of the academy schools. So again, yeah, I'm sorry, it's just such a bad picture, right? I really can't.
Store on Queensway and Kipling on the north side.
No, but I think it's advertised in the
They
back
make
of
all-
this
All the robes.
think it's advertised in the back of this document.
Been
I've
there.
driven by it, I've seen.
It's been there
Been
since
at the
we've been
light.
here.
I've
Since
been
we've
at
been
the
in
light
this
and looked at
building.
it, huh?
Yeah, so here's Charlie Cole in his outfit, young Charlie Cole. This is 1956. And here's Robert Johns and Bruce Glenn, good Academy teachers back in the day. And here's a wonderful news clipping. Oh, there's Carol Alden again. I think we already went over that one. Great news clipping of the dedication of the field house. So that'd be Lester Osborne, perhaps. Bishop DeCharms gone bald. And Willard Pendleton looking as good as ever.
But again, that's a red stole, with a gold stole. He used that for graduation every year, I remember.
Charlie Cole already did that. There's a couple of repeats, obviously. And 7:30 to 8:30 makes an hour-long doctrinal class. Or, this isn't exactly a doctrinal class. It's on the ritual of the church and how we are doing what we're doing. This little booklet, and anybody can look at it if they'd like. I've printed that out from the internet that Chris Barber sent. Has a great bunch of pictures from 1954 if you're interested in going back to your days of yore, and the kinds of beautiful outfits that people would wear back then, and robes and stuff like that. And a lot of them look pretty much like what we wear today, right? That's what we have nowadays. When you go on graduation, you have the doctor's PhD hood and all that sort of stuff. A lot of tradition because it's traditional. But
Some of the ministers not wearing them, what is that? It sort of seems like it's an individual thing.
you know, I think it's probably due for a conversation. I don't know. Maybe Jim or Jared could speak up to whether they've seen more discussion about it over the years. You know, I was out of the general church discussion thing for 5 years. In the last 4 years since I've been back, I haven't seen a lot of action or discussion. Jared?
I know that when my father was a young minister at the end of the 80s, early 90s, was sort of around when preaching without robes was starting to become acceptable in the general church. And I think before then, my sense is that it was expected that a minister wear a robe. And then around that time, people started making the argument that there are contexts in which the robe is more of a barrier than a useful thing. And that argument has sort of stood more or less since, that in some contexts the robe is a barrier, in others it serves a use. And to some extent, individual priests are left to decide that, is my understanding.
Well, I think in Glenview it was the society, the one minister wanted to change it recently, and they went to society discussion and and agreed they do it on the casual service, and the other one they'd stick with robes. But then they ran into a problem because the minister, to say the least, became pretty casual. And finally they had to sort of give a standard of what they expect of the regular clothes, because they really were, you talk about, you know, putting your robe on, well, to say the least, they were pretty casual. And so they had to make a rule about, well, what was acceptable for the casual part. Well, you
But
know.
it's a really interesting question too. When I was growing up, women wouldn't dare to wear slacks to church.
That's right.
And my first time back at the cathedral after many years, I was just shocked to see people who I had grown up with, that you didn't dress like that. You wore a dress for church. So it was really hard to first, but now I'm just like, I'd rather be warm than chilly. That's why, you know, or something. I don't care. And to me, I just want people to come to church. But it's interesting because I also want to, you know, be clean and neat. I like to take thought what I'm doing going to church. But it doesn't bother me if other people don't.
Well, we weren't allowed to work on the chancel unless we, even just to go and clean,
Yeah.
to certain people here, because unless we were wearing skirts.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to go on in
It's
pants.
a lot of it's just cultural over time, right? Things change and, you know, the ladies used to wear gloves and hats too. I remember that.
And skirts.
I'm so glad they stopped wearing
Yeah,
hats in
Wenda,
church.
we figured if Rachel Morley wore pants to church, we could wear pants.
That's right. Well, that's what I was. It was when some of those bishops' wives were, I'm like, oh, okay, they can do it, I guess I can.
I miss the hats.
We don't.
I don't.
And the gloves.
I don't.
Oh, I
The
thought some
gloves.
of them were fantastic.
Roger,
Oh,
I can always tell when you're lying. All your hair falls out.
It caused stress in our marriage when I arrived, when I came to a doctrinal class with a pantsuit, and it was a very, like, the top came down past my hips, and my husband looked at me and said, "You can't come to go to a doctrinal class in that." And I stood my ground, but I tell you, it was pretty hard. He was really saying, "You better not, you're really gonna get kicked out of the church."
We're allowed to grow and change.
That was when
And
Keith was after Keith was born.
what I find interesting when Swedenborg's visiting various societies in the other worlds, these societies, many of them have stayed exactly the way they were when, 3rd century BC, they all died and went to heaven. And so they're carrying on with horses and chariots the way they have always, and they're wearing what they were wearing back in the day. And, they walk around in their same sort of outfits. And Swedenborg visits the angels or the heavens of the most ancient and the silver heavens, and he goes to these places and they're just happy with what they have, the way things were back in the day, and that's the way things have been for their state in heaven since forever. And we'll be able to find a place in heaven where we're happy, and we might all wear big hats in church forever. If Roger wants to be in that society, Roger, there is a society, the Big Hat Society of Heaven.
fascinating. Marion Swan had the most unbelievable hats.
Oh, thank you for helping.
That's all right. Remember Aunt Judy's fur hat that came
Yeah.
down like this and everybody.
So
And
we
these
all have
feathers
various.
all over the
We all have various. I remember going to South Africa, Southern Africa, and all the women that were in this congregation, it was in Lesotho, I was working with the Lord's New Church, and they all wore red and white. That was sort of the women's garb, and they sang like there was no tomorrow, because that was the way they worshiped the Lord, and it was beautiful, and they all looked like they were just so happy with 1953. Why not? That was the style of their outfits and everything, their dresses or their skirts, whatever. It was beautiful.
Each church has its own uniform.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Looks like-
Women dress in a particular way
Yeah.
so that everybody knows what church they're going to.
What pride.
Yeah.
Yeah. What beauty.
Well,
What an
most
honor.
gospel choirs have
Yeah.
gowns.
And what is said about the TCR passage that I read, the prince and the priest, the people, they wore something that had an eagle on it, whether it was an eagle in the nest or it was beautiful insignia of their society. And we know that there's also one that talks about the White Horse Society, a beautiful insignia of those places. So I hope this has just given you some ideas concerning the way we worship and why we worship, the use of the robes and how they've developed and changed over the years or haven't changed. For myself, the best part was studying this and just seeing the wide variety that I had not actually seen before. I knew there were a couple of these different chasubles and various stoles, but I never saw this document before, and so it was fascinating to get it very late in the afternoon and read through it and be able to present hopefully something that you also found useful. So thank you to the supper committee, which is Sandy, and I think she's gone now. So, but she'll be asking me tomorrow, how many people came to doctrinal class? And we will thank, each one of you will thank her by me telling you her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.